In the last episode, we introduced line items, but they were pretty boneheaded. They didn't make any sense, and everyone shared a cart, which is generally not what you want out of an e-commerce system. We should probably fix that. Let's get started. We'll start out by adding a test to show the behavior that we need to support. I'm just going to rearrange some stuff. Okay. So we're going to duplicate this test, and we're going to say that different sessions should have different carts. Okay, so far we're adding something to the cart, and this is using the default session. What we're going to do now is change browser sessions. So Hound has a function called change session to, and it just takes a string argument that you can use to reference it later if you need to. We don't. And then we'll navigate to the cart in the new session and assert that there's nothing in the cart. And so let's go ahead and run the tests. And they fail because, as we know, there is no concept of cart yet. So we're going to add a cart model, and we'll associate line items with carts. We're also going to generate a UUID for our carts, though we won't be using them as our primary key. We just want a UUID to store in the browser session for guests. So there's our cart model, and we'll also associate line items with our carts, so let's add a migration for that. And let's open that migration up. And what we're going to do is alter table line items. And we're going to add a cart ID that references the carts table. So we can run the migrations. And we'll also need to update the models appropriately. So first, line items belong to carts. So let's open up the line item model. And it belongs to cart. And we need to add a required field for cart ID. Now in the cart model, we want to auto-generate UUIDs and tell our schema that carts have many line items. So to auto-generate, we just say auto-generate true, and then has many line items. And it's a Phoenix Commerce line item. We also want to remove the UUID from the required fields because we're auto-generating it now. And since the carts now don't have any required fields, we also need to remove one of the generated tests. So let's come in here, and this is not required for valid attributes. And since we have no required valid attributes, we can't fail to be valid. So let's just remove that. We also need to update the line item test as they need to reference a valid cart. And I know this is slightly different than we ended on last time, but it's actually worth it because I want to show you something. So make a new product. Okay, and I'll make a new cart. And now we need to add some aliases. So we're going to use a feature that we got in Elixir 1.2 for multi-alias. So this saves us quite a few keystrokes for adding aliases and just tightens up the code a little bit. And so now we want the product ID to be the inserted products ID, and we want the cart ID to be the inserted carts ID. So with that in place, our models are ready, and now we'll update the controller to add a cart if there's not one in the session, and assign the session references into the connections assigns maps. And I'll just do that so that I don't have to describe that so much. Let's do multi-assign to include the cart model, and now we'll plug an add cart function, which we're going to write right now. So add cart takes a connection and no options. And what we're going to do is look into the session for a cart UUID. And if there's not one, we're going to insert a new cart. If there was one, we get a UUID back. And we're going to query for the cart. And we will say the repo.one query is what we're returning here, which will give us our cart. And so finally, we're going to assign that cart to both the assigns map, and we will put the cart UUID in the session. Okay, so now in our show action, we only want to get line items from the user's cart, and there's other ways to do this, but for now I'm just going to use the cart ID field and look in the assigns for the cart's ID. And then when we add a line item, we're going to include the cart ID. Oopsie, this was a typo. Okay, we're going to include the cart ID, so we'll get the cart out of the assigns and add the ID. And that should do it. So with that in place, I'm pretty sure our acceptance test will pass. We'll try it. And that's it. Today we saw how to use multiple sessions in Hound, how to auto-generate UUID fields in Ecto models, and we added some more functionality to our e-commerce application. We also saw the new multi-alias feature that was added in 1.2. I hope you enjoyed it. See you soon!